Thank you so much, Josh. Everybody can see my full screen, right? Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you all for joining us here at Futurespaces. Thank you, Josh, for inviting me to close out the year. So today we're going to be going over rewilding the mind and how wonder and weird questions unlock inspiration. And the heart of this chat is really getting into some applied ways of wonder through the lens of connecting with the natural world. And this is actually a continuation of a conversation Josh and I were having at South by Southwest in 2002 that you can see us on the stage, Josh, me, and Raina. So we were leading a panel on trends and challenges in experience design. And in that moment, so at the time I was still with Meow Wolf, and I was explaining what the experience is like. I said, it's like rewilding, but through an immersive art experience. And we didn't get to elaborate much on that. We were talking about other trends and challenges, but it was something that kind of stuck and piqued Josh's interest. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. So rewilding the mind is really about leaning more into your own intuition. So, like tuning into your intuition so that you're more attuned to nature, natural rhythms, and connected to other living beings. It's also about not over analyzing things. So, like starting to balance and embrace your visceral understanding of the world with your innate wisdom. And so that's what I was trying to lean on, like with the Meow Wolf experience. It's one of the few experiences where you don't have a map of the place. You don't exactly know all the things to do. So you really are being able to like just lean on your own intuition. You have to just start making some decisions. Like Bob Ross, I love that quote from Bob Ross. He said that once, like, just get in there and make some decisions. Just paint a leaf here and there. So that's what the Meow Wolf experience is like, is that, you're constantly rewarded for leaning into your own choice making and intuition. So those are two of the points. But then also parts of rewilding of the mind that we're going to talk about today are like practical ways to trust your instinct. So mindful observation, body awareness, small decisions like practicing, just like low stakes decisions to build trust in your own instincts. And then rewilding connection is about unlearning some of the societal conditioning that we have that disconnects us from nature. So a lot of times you have to, and that's for your own survival, right? Like you might not have the energy to deal with it. There might be some risk involved with leaning on your own intuition. So what is it like to make small steps and make it a practice of rewilding your mind and reconnecting with your own intuition? So let's go on a little journey. That is me hiking in Santa Fe. So first, before we start diving into some of the practicality of everything, I want to talk about the umbrella of bio-inspired design. So we're just gonna chat about some of the terms that you guys have probably already heard, like just through LinkedIn or through articles when you're looking at different projects. But want to just clarify some of the focus for each of the terms so that we all have a better understanding of the angle that the creators were coming from. So one is biomorphic design. Biomorphic design is really aesthetic driven. So the scale doesn't really matter. Colors, you can warp it, you can distort the proportions, but it's really looking towards nature for aesthetic purposes and then pulling it together and weaving it together in whatever way inspires you the most. And it can be 2D, as you're seeing with the wallpaper. It can be industrial design or furniture making with the manta chair that you're seeing right there that's modeled after a manta ray. And then this structure here is actually in Meow Wolf, Denver, and I've always called it the diatom. That is not the name of that structure, but you can see the resemblance that it is very bio-inspired in its structure if you start looking at some of the forms and fractals and patterns found in nature. So that's what biomorphic design is. It's truly just it is aesthetic driven and you have full freedom over the scale. Then there's biophilic design. So like a love of nature. So you're actually like bringing in natural elements into the built environment. So plants, you'll see it with like the green walls. You'll see that with like the Changi Airport, with water and light and plants. And I love solar punk, which is like a fusion of both biomorphic and biophilic designs. And then I'll just read this quick quote here. And it says, the presence of nature in the built environment has been shown to reduce stress, enhance creativity and clarity of thought, improve well-being, and expedite healing. So this is coming from Stephen Keller in the Biophilic Design book, Theory, Practice, Science. And it's just really beautiful. And biophilic design is largely experience driven. So well-being. And then Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright, his architecture, kind of a lot of it kicked off with him. Bioutilization is using the actual plant or thing or organism from nature practically. So there's like a practical use behind the material. So you'll see that with mushroom leather. You'll see that with seaweed fabric or with algae-based plastics, fuel, and other things what's some other things made from inks? You can get inks from algae. So there's a lot of different cool ways to have bioutilization. This is one of them that I was like most impressed by when I started working within sustainability. So this student here from Mapua University in the Philippines, he made these solar panels for the windows. And he's getting all of those colors from plant waste. And so the plant waste is actually able to capture UV radiation even on like a cloudy day. And so that light is absorbed and then re-emitted from those particles, those organic particles, as visible light through the substrate of the window, and then off to the frame edge of the window is where the photovoltaic kind of panels and capture is happening. But I just thought that like that form of bioutilization is really, really beautiful and just really bespoke and awesome. So another one, biorobotics, very popular. Here is the Moroccan Flick Flack spider. This robot is made by Festo. They're based in Germany. And this spider just travels across the hot desert in the most efficient way possible by rolling forward and springing off of its front legs. And so that's exactly what this robot can do, is it can walk like a spider, but then it can ball up and spring forward and just move efficiently. So a lot of times biorobotics, the focus is task efficiency, but also mimicking forms found in nature. And then before we get into biomimicry, this is another reference I'm going to give is bionics. And that is kind of nested under biorobotics, but it's usually in medical engineering. And it's a field of biological systems that restore or enhance abilities. So this would include cochlear implants or prosthetic arms, legs, hands. But there's like a fusion between the human body and a piece of robotics to help with assistive technology. And so what I study and what lens we're going to look through today is biomimicry. So biomimicry is innovation inspired by 3.8 billion years of life on Earth. Yes, billion. And you can see me here. I'm out with my biomimicry cohort. We traveled to 6 different ecosystems, really reconnecting with nature and looking at the functions, the forms found in nature, and really getting a better understanding for how the environment works. And I love the picture that's in the lower right. That's me talking about orcas. I'm talking about the dorsal fin of the orca can be 4 to 6 feet tall. And like, I'm secretly hoping to see an orca, but also not wanting to see an orca at that moment. Like we're out on these sea kayaks, but yeah, on the trips, each of us, we would pick an organism to then teach the group about how they've evolved over time. So yeah. So biomimicry asks what nature would do to solve the challenge. That's at the heart of it. And some of the things that really separate or differentiate biomimicry from some of the other fields of bioinspiration that I was just talking about is there's these three elements. So there's the ethos, which represents like our respect for and responsibility to and gratitude to nature. And then there's also a reconnect element, like we all as biomimics need to have a actual connection with nature, like actually be immersed in it, go on hikes to really understand how it works from a seasonal level, how it works from a microscopic level. Um, and then there's the emulate portion. So biomimicry is not just aesthetic driven. And honestly, when I first heard the time, I thought it was going to be like biomorphic design. But there are these three elements where I'm creating conditions conducive to life, and there's this emulate portion that where proportions matter, principles, patterns, strategies, all of those things are working together so that we can create better more sustainable designs in the future. So for today, as we're tapping into rewilding the mind, I'm going to focus really on the reconnect element. So how we can better connect with nature. And we'll also talk about some of the emulation design processes. So 3 ways to connect with nature. And the re is set up like that because we don't want to assume that you have no connection with nature. So it's either re or continuing your connection with the natural world. So let's talk about some practical ways of connecting. So one of the ways is through someone else's eyes. So these are some photos that I took just on a walk by myself at a place called Frenchie's Field here in Santa Fe. And these are the types of things that catch my eyes, like flowers, insects interacting with flowers, plants, how they're changing seasonally or drying out, or how they're doing with water. And then also ant hills. I love ant hills. I'm always looking for where their entrance is. And because usually it's directed toward the sunrise so that they can thermoregulate their colony. So those are the things I usually look for is like insects. How are the plants doing? And so one of the challenges was from my teacher is to go out with someone who is much younger than me or someone who is much older than me. So we'll see what Clementine, my 7-year-old neighbor, was attracted to. So Clementine was like, whoa, like that tree has a yellow streak down the side of it. I was ignoring that. Like to me, I didn't see it. But we started talking about it and learned that it was like a fungal kind of strip on the tree that was causing the bark to peel away and expose some of the softer kind of bark tissues under the external core. And then she was looking at some of the leaves that were on the ground. And then she was very excited to pick up this decaying lizard and dance it up and down my arm. So, but we still had a very good conversation about like, this is like really getting us to those, what is this? Why is this kind of questions as we're reconnecting to nature? So we were talking about like, why would the stomach decay first? Like, why would, we were talking about and exploring those kinds of things. So that's one way to connect with nature is through somebody else's eyes. I highly, highly recommend it. Just like talking about it, like what jumps out to the other person. On the move versus staying put. I love hiking. I love walking fast when I'm hiking. I love being on my gravel bike. So another challenge from one of my teachers was if you are someone that is on the move through nature constantly, you need to sit still, like for a solid hour. And usually for me, as I'm hiking and going through nature, I'm observing it like from a seasonal shift level, or I'm looking at layers and the colors, like sky, trees, reeds, looking at how the trees are arching in over a pathway, looking at the landscape dynamics, like where are the shrubs versus the aspen. Like that's how I'm usually taking in the environment when I'm moving really fast and I'm taking in smells and things I can easily see. So I had to sit for an hour and I was very anxious about that. But when I sat out in the natural world for an hour, and this is already like 20 minutes in and I hadn't seen anything, I'm like just looking at dirt, right? I see some ants walking with flower petals. And that gave me the why question of Like, why? Like, I don't know. Why would ants be walking around with flower petals? It's a beautiful little parade, but I have no idea why. And so I had to like do some research and look for some other like photos online. But one of the reasons, only one of the reasons, and there's like multiple reasons why they could have been walking with the flower petals. But one is that if a bee dies nearby, um, near their colony where they live, they want to protect it. They want to mask the smell. So it's like potpourri. Like they're trying to mask the smell so that it doesn't attract opportunistic predators like spiders or birds that are gonna go ahead and eat the bee, but also they like to eat ants. So that's just one of the reasons why you would see this. And it really works towards proving the point that you must quiet your human cleverness when you see these things in nature, because most of the people I saw online were saying, "Oh, they like to host a bee funeral. Oh, it's so amazing. Look at that little funeral. Look at the little procession." It's like, no, it's a function there. They're trying to mask the smell. And same thing here with these long-jawed orb weavers in Texas a few years back. They like really took over this area. And I was at the time in my studies looking for examples of community found in nature. So in my head, I made up this story like, oh, they're like, it's a community coming together to share their resources, all this stuff. And that's not the case at all. They took over that area because there was just this like amazing surplus of insects in the area during that time of year. So you really have to like not make up a scenario like, hey, there's an example of communities. Like, no, they're social, but they weren't there just to like share things because there was a lack of resources. Like there was an abundance of resources. And I'll just give one more example of, you know, on the move versus staying put and how you tap into quieting your human cleverness. So another thing is like when you're staying put or versus being on the move is to look beyond the surface level. So here you might look at the cactus and say, oh, those spines are simply for protection, right? And keep it moving. But the spines actually slow down temperature change. It creates a boundary layer of air around the cactus to prevent frost. The desert gets really cold at night, like freezing. And here in Santa Fe, it snows. So yeah, it helps to prevent frost. The pleats that are there help with shading and cooling. So it's actually a very multifunctional design to have the spines there on that outer edge of the pleat. And the pleats also multifunctional, again, shading and cooling, but also help with the cactus as it wants to expand or contract as it gets more water resource. And so another thing when you're reconnecting with nature is to get up close. So, and don't tell anybody I said like touch poison ivy or something, like not that close as you're comfortable, because that's when you're going to start to see some things that you didn't notice before. And so right now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch over to the microscope because I told people I'd share my microscope. Is there a way, Josh, that you can pin the microscope when I bring it up? Yeah. Okay. Can you guys see it? Is it like in big mode for you?
Did
Or
that
you got,
work?
or you can pin it on your own. Everybody can pin there. So on LinkedIn, I told my friends like, hey, you know what? I'll just find something in my backyard and show it on the microscope during my chat. So that's what I'm doing. It wasn't quite in my backyard, but in my basement, I found a dead moth. Don't judge me. And so I started looking closer. So this is another way to reconnect with nature, is that, you know, there are some things that you can't just see with your natural eye. Even when I was just holding the moth to my closer to my face, I didn't see that there was these slight kind of like lilac purple stripes on the edges of the wing, and that at the base of the wing there are these larger kind of like longer furs. Let's just call it furs. And so that helps you ask these better why questions, like why would there be purple there? Why would there be um you know, the longer hairs at the specifically at the base of the wing? And so I was looking to find out, and it says that actually helps with thermal regulation. So as the muscles of the insect are generating heat during flight, those help to retain some of the heat, and the fur. It's not called fur, sorry. It's called like setae or something. Also protects against debris, damage, and parasites at the base of the wing. So it's a very nice protective layer it has at the that important joint right there. And then also the purple, I was looking to that, and it's usually the color that you see in insects is structural light. And so there it was saying that the purple is usually like to attract a mate or to help like diffract the light in a way so that you can't really see the exact shape of the moth if it's moving around in daylight or traveling through dappled light in a forest. It helps kind of, let's just say, fuzz them out a bit, having that color around the edges. So and honestly, when I looked up both of these, it had like 10 different reasons why. So those are just like a couple things, but nature usually has multifunctional design associated with its features, which is really cool. So I will share my screen again. I will switch back from the microscope. I also had a juniper berry, but that wasn't as satisfying. It just kind of looked like Jupiter. Um, but I will start sharing the slideshow again. Give me a moment. Here we go. You guys are seeing what you should see right now? Okay, great. So those are the 3 ways to reconnect with nature. I hope you guys can apply that in some way. Now we're moving on to ways of approaching wonder and curiosity. So the biomimicry lens of thinking gets us into the how questions. So how questions move us into how we can emulate some of the things we find in nature. Anything that's evolved on the planet and is still alive today has followed all of these life principles. So adapting to changing conditions, being locally attuned and responsive, integrating development with growth, being resourceful and material with material and energy, using life-friendly chemistry and evolving to survive. And this can be applied to human design and innovation as well. So here is a picture of me back when I was studying photonics and precision optics. I look very sleepy there. But as someone that comes from that field, I have always been very drawn to this idea that, hey, like all the other organisms on this planet aren't really experiencing the world the same way that I am. So some of the questions we in biomimicry ask of nature is, how does nature send attuned signaling? This is right here is a dialogue just between the bee and the pollen, like the pollinator and the flower. That's the conversation going on. Like we don't see that, but the flower has a nice target saying, hey, come over here. The bee can see deep into the UV range, and we can't quite see that. So this then helps us with product innovation. I included one of the most popular biomimicry examples, which is the burr that helped inspire Velcro. But going back to attuned signaling, here is the mantis shrimp, one of my most favorite organisms. It has trinocular depth perception from a single eye. It has 12 color receptors. We have 3. And we have binocular vision. It's the only animal that's able to detect circular polarized light, which is just really neat. And some scientists have figured out a way to create a very sensitive camera where it detects color and polarized light, and they're able to detect cancer cells early on from that. So that's a mantis shrimp inspired innovation. Another thing for attuned signaling, spiders will weave in UV reflective threads in their webs so that birds don't fly into them. And a company called Ornolux Glass, or this is Ornolux Glass, that's the product, made by, what is the company? Arnold Glass in Germany. They found a solution where we don't, and since we can't see into the UV range, they started putting in strands that would reflect UV light into windows to prevent bird collisions there, which is another really great biomimicry invention. So yeah, again, seeing what bird vision is versus our vision. and how that has helped to solve for birds crashing into windows. This is more with structure-based solutions. So sharks have these microstructures. So sharklet is one of the world's first technologies to stop bacterial growth through pattern alone. And that was through, seeing the dermal denticles of shark skin. So they were able to replicate that size and pattern, because that pattern requires too much energy for bacteria to colonize on it. And then another question: how does nature self-clean? Same thing as the shark. Um, the waxy pillars on lotus leaf, you can see like a little microscopic diagram of it. There's these waxy pillars on lotus leaves that kind of catch the debris, don't let it get onto the leaf to stop photosynthesis or any blockers like that. And then the water, those pillars are also hydrophobic. And when the water comes, it just washes away the debris and the water rolls right off the leaf. So Lotus on paint does the same thing. So I started working with some folks at Art Processors. That's where I am now. Art Processors does museum design and production. And the sister company of Art Processors is Pladia. And they do a lot, that company does a lot of wayfinding, geotagged audio experiences, and things that you would, trigger from your mobile device to help with any sort of immersive experience. And so I spoke with Andy Mastrosavas. She's the CEO of Pladia. And I said, hey, like, what kind of question do you have for nature? And she said, well, how do we allow the audience to self-discover and generate pathways? And I always love the story of slime mold and how these scientists set up little pieces of oat on the same kind of map as Tokyo, where they have their city stops. And then they put the slime mold down at Tokyo as like the originating point, and it formed pathways similar to the existing system. So it's like, in theory, this decentralized kind of approach, this like multi-nuclei organism with no brain was able to engineer a similar kind of pathway as these engineers. So it's like, almost like, in theory, they could, in the future, if they want to add a stop, put a piece of oat down and do a test that way. But this requires teaching, because as you can see, it spreads out a very thin pathway, and the most efficient pathways to the nutrients stay. And so that requires a bit of teaching, but it's also more related to efficient pathways. And so what if we want it to be a little more exploratory? So then right here we have some Spanish moss, and you get water externally from the Spanish moss. You're seeing these trichome leaves. As soon as there's a droplet of moisture from the air, it creates this domino effect that shares all the moisture with the rest of the plant. And so the question is, how do we give guests agency to receive and share info? Could the volume of nutrients, aka the info, be modular and dynamic like moisture and air? And then, so this is like really kind of what the scoping phase in biomimicry would look like. We would say, is there visual attunement involved? Do we want people to teach people in the physical environment or digital environment? Is it audible attunement instead? Is it something where you're walking around with your mobile app and you can hear the stronger kind of sound going that way? People are voting that you should take that pathway instead. And I could imagine that being really awesome on hikes or just different things to make it more immersive. So that's what these would be, like the next questions within like a scoping phase, is what would the final format be so that we can ask better questions of nature. And so right here, this is where we get to the deeper questions, is when we're looking to nature for social innovation. Like the product innovations usually are like a one-on-one, or we know a function we're trying to get to. But with social innovation, it requires a bit of translation and some deeper kind of questions. And I really like this format because it really dissects and gets to the heart of like, what's the emergent property or goal that you're creating here? So I asked the Art Processors CEO, Mark Nihill, what are your 3 questions to nature? And these are some very deep questions that you might not necessarily think that you can ask nature, but you can. So he said, how do we create a life affirming response with our experiences? How do we alter perspectives, energetic states, and make energetically brighter humans? How do we create a heightened sense of being? And I love that those were his questions to nature. I feel like that's been my life goal with any shows, like going from pyrotechnic industry to Disney Imagineering to Meow Wolf to now museums and interpretive design is like, yes, I want to tell a story or create an experience, but ultimately for the people that are designing the show and for the people experiencing it, how do we create this kind of effect? Um, so in this process, you have to like decenter the human voice a bit. But before you do that, you brainstorm. So I brainstormed with about 20 people and I said, what evokes a heightened sense of being or expanded sense of being for you? And it was community, authenticity, safety, feeling and thinking like freely. Those were the top reoccurring elements. Um, and this statement was the most resonant, an experience of not feeling separate from the rest of creation. And if you translate that back into nature, like what are we asking nature? It's how do I fully fill my niche? That is what it feels like to create, enlightened humans and good experiences. How do you create a situation where people feel like they're fully filling their niche and connected? So the vision is kind of we're asking nature, how do we, through a mutualistic relationship, create this shift in perspective that allows people to better fill their niche within the exhibition? And how are we creating this shift that allows people to better fill their niche in life, right? It can be scalable. Um, don't laugh at the next slide. That is a beaver. So one of the emergent properties is a biomimic specialist might start looking at keystone species. So how do we allow each guest to act as and perceive themselves as a keystone species? So beavers fill their niche in an ecosystem by building dams and creating wetlands and providing habitats for numerous species, regulating water flow. They enhance the water quality. They stabilize ecosystems. And so that's what makes them a keystone species. And so it's like, how do we scale that to an immersive experience, or how do we scale it up so that they can see how people can do that in real life? And so normally in a biomimicry discovery phase, I would look at a whole bunch of keystone species around the world and look at like their actions. What are they doing? How do we recreate that for humans? But I just based it off the beaver just to say like, okay, what is it? So it's really about leaving room for the guest to have external expression, so actions, interactions, internal expression and development, cognitive, emotional, and what's the requirement for all of that to coexist together. It was about having, you guys already know, participatory, reflective, but open-ended. Open-ended was also a big part of it. So leaving space or curating an experience in such a way where there's wonder that's allowed to manifest and that they can go on any path they want to and know that other things exist, but be content that they were able to lean on their own intuition and create an experience that made them happy. And I always compare it to like, hey, like, remember when you were little, you probably had like a bucket of Legos and like each day you set out to like just have fun, make a thing. Maybe you started with 2 or 3 blocks and then the vision came to you as you went along. And you were okay not using every single Lego in the pile. Like you didn't have to do that. So that's what I, in my mind, translate open-endedness to, is that you've created and curated this experience where over and over again, the guest can experience these little pockets of open-endedness. See that little neural network where they can hit on 2 or 3 dots. They know there's other dots, but they've formulated the thing that they're happy with, and it's still the right answer. Um, so yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Genell, amazing. Thank you. Let's if you have questions, let's put them in the chat and specify whether you want me to ask or whether you'd like to ask yourself. But I can
Should
also
I
I can start off a little bit too.
should I stop
Um,
sharing my screen?
oh yeah,
Or
yeah, that'd be great.
do. Okay.
All right. And like, if anyone needs this information, I'll make sure they can get it. Um, no, do you know,
Ooh, I felt like I talked fast.
no, that was great. That was great. No, I'm so curious, so, so looking back on the sort of like recent, experience and focusing on biomimicry, like how does this sort of like inform some of the earlier work that you've done, or how do you think you might have approached it differently, like knowing what you know now?
Oh man. Approach the earlier work. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, when you were doing stuff at Disney or Meow Wolf, like, I know Meow Wolf does a lot, there's a lot of bio-inspired thingy there, but like,
yeah.
are there things you might, like, yeah, we might have done that a little differently, or like, like, yeah, well, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say the easiest thing is looking at biomimicry for social innovation. So
Yeah.
that's a thing I would have looked at more. I do think that, getting materials integrated or things like that are a kind of longer process because it's more of like a systems based thing, right? It's like if you replace this material with that and now your contractor has to, it's a ripple effect thing. Whereas like I think with social innovation, you can start slowly changing culture or the way things are done or the way that you do a brainstorm about an exhibit, and dissect what kind of goals you want, or like the dynamics you want to have it play in the experience for the guest. So I think, yeah, using a lot more social innovation inspired by nature.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I love the idea of the staying put versus moving, because like I think a lot about like when you're doing museums or creating experiences, like being thoughtful about how you move people through space and where you give them places to reflect and where you move them. I just like love for you to kind of like talk a little bit more about how that sort of is intersected with your sort of practice.
Yeah, it's been a thing I've had to build on, and I think like with any practice, like if you're starting to exercise or do yoga, like I am still in the practice of like getting very comfortable with sitting still in nature so that I can get some of those insights that are very different from me just zipping through on a hike with my dog who's right beside me right now or on my bike and taking lots of photos on my Seek app. I don't You guys should download the Seek app. It's very cool. You can identify plants and
I
insects
love
and
it.
all that stuff and become a part of the iNaturalist community. um so definitely check that out. But yeah, I think yeah, there's a great importance to leaving space for both to happen for
Yeah,
people.
I love it. Christopher has a question. Chris, you want to ask?
Yeah, I have to turn on my mic. I love you working with sociality. I mean, I think that that is the final kind of hurdle we need to get through with this immersive, interactive, engaging.
Yeah.
I deal with what I call conversational story creation, meaning it's an open-ended, emergent kind of story that's authored to a bit, but the audience evolves it through the interaction with each other.
Oh,
How do
I
you
love
work with conversation? And also with museums, we try to look at a collection of conversations versus objects. How do you work with conversation?
Oh, I'm talk a little bit more about that, like a collection of conversations versus objects.
Well, I do what I call story troves. I author a story within a box of objects, and
Uh-huh.
then a group of people inspect it and discover the story.
I
And
love
that
that. That's fun.
it creates so much curiosity, they immediately start having conversations. And I started it with people with aphasia, the people who have um, loss of use of language due to a stroke. So they couldn't use words. So libraries, museums, all these things were a wall of words to them. Even movies, it's audio, speaking, and so forth. But what happens is that getting this object full of questions and mystery, and it's authored because the story's in it, but it's authored with competing potential uh, interactions, dilemmas, pathways, so that they can make it their own. No instructions, no rules, no wrong answer. And it takes about, for a simple box on a table, about 90 to, 2 hours, 90 minutes, 2 hours to do on its own. No one tells them when to stop. And so it's like a movie, but it's all inanimate objects. We've been trying to work with it in a virtual world and telepresence. It's not quite the same because we work with our hands, we talk with our hands and faces, and The objects also speak from that in all the senses, all dimensions, all directions, but all around a table. So in that, we usually deal with subjects. Okay, so it's hard for them to communicate. So they're overcoming their obstacle for
Mhm.
communication. But we usually deal with an issue, which is something that is problematic. A lot of times we've been doing a lot with uh, reconciliation on American history. So we usually work with fictional history so that we kind of make it up. So no one knows the right answer, but it's within context to a significant event in history. So they have to kind of live it amongst themselves. And that conversation brings up so many different approaches that people have.
Yeah, it seems that might sort of dovetail to open-endedness. Janelle, you want to take that?
Yeah, no, it really dovetails nicely into the open-endedness kind of network bubble where you can take it anywhere you want to within this bubble, and there's
Yeah.
multiple entry points that have been created. And no matter what journey the person takes, it's correct.
Yes.
And I'm curious your thoughts on connecting that to like the other pieces, like the participatory and the reflective bits and how that all ties in. And I would also recommend, and I may even share my screen, is visiting asknature.org
Right.
because they break nature down into like functions, like how does nature, the natural world, create community, and it
Right.
has tons of
Right.
examples.
In this conversation we have, a lot of times it's everyone working in their own way, in their own time, in their interaction. I mean,
Yeah.
I compare it with delivering a pizza. The story trove is like getting a pizza and we put it, everyone's around the table and grabs a slice, eat it, enjoy it, talk it. But these linear stories are more like delivering the pizza through a keyhole, which is not the same. But the satisfaction of that, particularly if they have challenge with words, it's remarkable to see. And they're mediating themselves. They socially mediate. I mean, it's not like anything we have to program, which I
Nice.
think that's responsible.
I,
I love it. Oh, Chris, sorry,
I love
actually, I wanted to jump to another. Jill, you okay with me jumping to another question real quick?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, and thank you for
Jan had a question.
yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
This is very exciting, and thank you for your presentation so far. I just wanted to ask around like embodied and immersive sort of media-driven spaces, and if you've either worked on or seen some really compelling examples of how biomimicry can inform that, like thinking everything from the use of audio, from narration to spatial, to compression and release of spaces, to touch or proximity, or how people are interacting because it just feels like it's rich with opportunity for like developing like a universal and accessible like almost language out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I I don't have a specific example, but my mind was going crazy with ways in which we can achieve it, and it honestly combines all of the different forms of bio-inspired design that we were just talking about. So like including biomorphic design, including ways where we're looking at social innovation, looking at ways like how nature functions or how environments are shaped
Mhm.
naturally. Look like, and what is being attuned to your own body, like what feels good, or how long can you be in a confined space and it's exciting before like, oh, I need a big vista, or like, just really looking at yeah, how humans experience space, how like signal attunement works. Can there be some reveals under UV? Can there be, yeah, like how can we distort perspective, and things like that. And also to create better, I guess like community guest experiences. Like I think that's it's ripe for that, so that it's, I mean, I know there's like a lot of different like video mapping and interactive and like easy to tap in ways to do a thing with video mapping, but I think even pushing it further, so it feels like building community could be great. But yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that term attunement, by the way. Where did that come from?
I think I just learned it from studying biomimicry. Like it was just a way to talk about nature and how organisms communicate with each other, so that it's like, no, I'm specifically talking to this bee, not you guys. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so it's like about signal attunement. Like, how does nature finally attune its signals so that it's sending the message exactly to who it wants to get to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Les had a question.
Yeah.
Hey, is there a kind of a
Hey, friend.
biological, hi there, man, and you're mentioning solar punk really brought back some memories. But I wonder if, one thing I don't see in nature is storytelling. Is that a distinctive human thing? And I was thinking maybe bee dances tell some sort of story, but maybe you have more insight.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. So in the section where I was talking about social innovation, you take in the initial question as it is, like, how does nature do storytelling? And then it's really like, what do we mean? Like, what aspects of storytelling? Like, is it about teaching? Is it about communal storytelling? Is it about one-on-one storytelling? Like, what kind of storytelling are we talking about? And so that starts to decenter the human voice so that you can find the examples that you want. And then once you find those examples, there's that other level of abstraction where you're like, oh, like this is how I could see it working in a variety of ways within an exhibition context or web format or whatever format you're working through. You try to look for those designs. But yeah, you get to the heart of what is the function of the storytelling that I'm trying to get to.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let me, I will share my screen just like super quick before
Yeah,
we
go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Because I just wanted to show how to navigate Ask Nature. Are you guys seeing the Ask Nature site?
Yep.
Okay, so when you get to this site, you can go to biological strategies, and then you go to search strategies. And on this side over here, there's functions, which is really cool. So maintain community is one. How does nature cooperate to maintain community? And you see
I love it.
all these examples here, right? But then you have to then abstract those principles. Like, is it in community? Is it one-on-one? Is it like, what are you seeing as you're looking at these functions? I just wanted to quickly share how to navigate the site. So yeah, that's it.
Oh, I love it. That's so useful. I mean, it's like, I mean, honestly, probably so much better than showing, our clients a bunch of like precedents and media moments. It's like it's an interesting point of departure.
Yeah.
Vinicius had a question. It might be pronounced. Is there a relationship between biomimicry and generative art or computer simulations? If so, could you share relevant examples of this integration?
Yeah, so I believe I'm forgetting if it's AutoCAD. So there is generative, I wouldn't call it art, but it's like to make sure there's no material waste in 3D printing. So they may generate the structure by mimicking how bones work, or mimicking some coral, or mimicking like structures that work in nature, and reevaluating, taking a pass at all your angles and things to make sure that you don't overuse material in 3D printing. So that's one. And then there's a lot that are like AI obviously is based on like neural network, right? And then there are some, I know that like Rafiq Anadol just announced some things that he's also doing, but that I think that's more of like encyclopedic, but it's still neural network kind of driven exploration into how nature works. So that was a pretty exciting announcement. Some other ones. Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of modeling on like swarm formations. Um, and that's another thing that I always like, I talk about, I mentioned it to like different teams that work remotely, is like keeping up that mentality of like, maybe you need like a 15-minute check-in every day just so that you're aware and can immediately react to your partners, your people in space that you're working with, right? And that's how those work, is like everybody can autonomously make their own slight adjustments. So I would say there's that. And then I have this like biocomputation book. Usually my stuff is like immediately beside me. I wish that, yeah, can I send people book links?
Yeah, of course. I'll make it happen. You send me, I'll send to them. Whatever, we can make it happen, or I can send you.
Okay. But yeah, there are biocomputation books for both flora, fauna, and things that are unbio related. So like geode kind of structures. But yeah.
I love it.
Uh,
Definitely a question.
the Rafiq's full name is Anadol, Rafiq Anadol.
Yeah.
Okay. I have another question. Vinus is well, actually, I'm not sure that I pronounced his name properly either. Just made me think about AI, and I was just thinking about AI and NI, or nature intelligence. I was just wondering, I mean, you mentioned a few examples of like flocking and stuff like that, where basically attempts to capture nature intelligence, just like we've captured human intelligence. Just wondering, want to hear what excites you now about nature intelligence, or are there efforts that you can point us to that in nature and building nature intelligence and using it like design, like you say here?
Yeah. For me, like leaning on nature's intelligence, the most exciting thing for me is actually just like community work, honestly. So it's less about digital realm. It's actually like working from the ground up with communities on biomimetic solutions found like right in their backyard. That is the most exciting thing for me, is working with people to make sure that they can reconnect with nature and get inspiration from it. And I'll tell a very, very quick story. My biomimicry cohort, we went to Louisiana to help with bio-inspired ideas around flood prevention and hurricane preparedness. And I was part of the group that was called Darkness No More or something like that, to like help with, power outages. So we sat with the community. They told us about all the things that happen leading up to a hurricane, like people fighting over gas at the gas station, grocery stores closing down, tons of food waste, trees in the road, that kind of stuff. Of course, we went in with like the simple solution, like, oh, like use solar panels and that can power your, you know, um, saws and your boats and da 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 da. And they were like, no. There's one guy in the crowd, he was like, baby, you about to have me dead in the water with that solution. And I was like, oh no, like what should we do? And he was like explaining this, they really lean on gas. Like they want an actual physical thing, like they want to have gas to power the saws to cut the trees and free up the roads, and they want the gas to power the generator. They don't want solar or batteries. That's not reliable to them. So we actually pulled inspiration from what thrives the most in a hurricane, which is mold. And they were like, wait, what? We hate mold. Don't get inspiration from that. We're like, no, wait. This thing it lays dormant with all the nutrients it needs until it has the right conditions, right? It's moisture, and now it's thriving. The spores are going wild. And so we encourage them like, hey, you should have a biofuel center to collect all the trees, to collect all that spoiled food from the grocery stores, to collect all those things that go to waste can be used for biofuel to solve your solution. So those are the things that excite me the most about nature's intelligence, is teaching people about nature's intelligence, even when they think like, no, not that nature, not that one.
Amazing. I threw one example of there was a Google project that they were using AI to interpret whale song. I'm actually talking to them about coming onto Futurespaces. That's a very cool one. But we'll talk about it later. But you know,
No,
we talked about having it. We
I
talked
will
about.
say, no,
Well,
I
go
agree
on.
with you. That is another thing that really excites me, because
Yeah.
I am working with some scientists on acoustics and how animals communicate, like marine animals. So looking at orcas, looking at dolphins, so like all of those things are very exciting to me too.
Yeah, there's an amazing, I think it was National Geographic, this thing where they showed the phonics of different animals, and then they
Uh,
basically use an AI to create like shapes. So you can see sort of like language maps. And you can see language
oh
maps
yes,
for different which are like human languages, but also for animal languages, which is very, very fun.
that's so interesting. Oh, I love. Wait, you said you put the link down in here.
I'll send you the link. I'll send the link out. All right, so Janelle, we're at time. We did it. Okay. We completed a Futurespaces, the last Futurespaces of 2024. But we agreed on a sign-off question. So, what advice would you give to future designers for creating experiences?
Oh, and in a nutshell, I would say always approach it from a life-centered design approach. So thinking about the ripple impact on your team, on the environment, what it feels like to create the thing, what it feels like for the people that are going to experience the thing. Not from the human-centered design, but from life-centered design and considering the whole planet.
Oh, fantastic. Genell, thank you so much. This is really, really inspiring. Loved having you here. Thank you everybody for being here. I will see you all next year. Excited to have you here. All right, signing off.
Happy holidays, Happy New Year.
Happy holidays, Happy New Year. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.